My car died on the highway at 2 a.m. in January. I left 3 voicemails. Mom, Dad, brother. Nobody called back. I walked 2 miles to a gas station in the cold. The next week, Dad texted, "Your mom needs help moving furniture Saturday. Don't be late." I left him on red. My name's Ted. I'm 29, and I used to think the worst feeling in the world was stepping on a Lego in the dark. Turns out that's a spa day compared to standing on the shoulder of a dead highway at 2 in the morning in January, watching your breath freeze in front of your face while your phone rings out to voicemail for the 3rd time. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up. I grew up in a small town outside of Columbus, Ohio. One of those places where everybody knows everybody and your parents' reputation matters more than your own. My dad, Roger, was the kind of guy who coached Little League and volunteered at the church pancake breakfast and made sure everyone in a 5-mile radius knew about it. My mom, Diane, was his perfect complement. She ran the PDA, organized neighborhood block parties, and could guilt trip you into doing anything with a single look over the top of her reading glasses. And then there was my older brother, Scott, golden boy, star quarterback, Dean's List, the kind of guy who peaked in high school but somehow kept riding that wave straight through college and into a cushy sales job at a medical device company. Scott was 3 years older than me and had been the center of our family's universe since the day he threw his first spiral in the backyard. Now look, I'm not sitting here saying my childhood was terrible. It wasn't. I had food on the table, a roof over my head, and parents who showed up to most of my stuff. The problem was that word, most, because when it came to Scott, they showed up to everything. Every game, every awards ceremony, every parent-teacher conference. For me, it was more like a coin flip. My dad missed my 8th grade graduation because Scott had a college visit that same day. My mom forgot to pick me up from band practice so many times that my friend Caleb's mom just started driving me home as a default. When I brought it up, I always got the same answer. "Ted, your brother has a lot going on right now. You understand." And I did understand. That was the problem. I understood perfectly. I just wasn't the priority. By the time I graduated high school, I'd made peace with it. Or at least I thought I had. I went to a state school about 2 hours away, studied accounting, kept my head down, and came home for holidays because that's what you do. Scott, meanwhile, had moved back to our hometown after college, bought a house 10 minutes from my parents, and cemented his role as the favorite son. Every Sunday dinner was a Scott showcase. How's Scott's job going? Did you hear Scott might get promoted? Scott's thinking about buying a boat. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there eating my mom's dry pot roast thinking, I just passed the CPA exam on my first try, but sure, let's talk about Scott's boat. After college, I moved to Cincinnati for a job at a mid-size accounting firm. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I worked hard, got decent raises, and built a quiet little life for myself. I had a small apartment, a 10-year-old Honda Civic that I loved like a family member, and a couple of good friends. I also had a girlfriend named Paige who I'd been seeing for about a year. She was a nurse, she laughed at my terrible jokes, and she was the first person in my life who made me feel like I wasn't just background noise. Things were good. Not perfect, but good. The thing about being the overlooked kid is that you develop this weird radar for when you're being taken for granted. You notice the little things. Like how my parents would call Scott every couple of days, but only call me when they needed something. "Ted, can you help us figure out this tax thing?" "Ted, your father's computer is doing that thing again. Can you walk him through it over the phone?" "Ted, we need someone to pick up Aunt Brenda from the airport and Scott's busy." I was the family IT department, handyman, and Uber driver, but never the family priority. I tried to bring it up once. Thanksgiving, 2 years ago. We were all sitting around the table, and my dad spent 20 minutes talking about how proud he was of Scott for closing some big deal at work. I'd just gotten a promotion to senior accountant, which I'd mentioned in the family group chat a week earlier. Nobody acknowledged it. So when there was a lull in the conversation, I said, "Hey, I actually got promoted last week. Senior accountant." My mom smiled and said, "Oh, that's nice, honey." Then she turned to Scott and asked if he wanted more stuffing. I looked at Paige across the table, and she squeezed my hand under the tablecloth. She saw it. She always saw it. But here's the thing about being the kid who never rocks the boat. You get really good at swallowing your feelings and moving on. So that's what I did. I swallowed it, smiled, and helped my mom with the dishes while Scott sat on the couch watching football with my dad. Same as always. Now let me tell you about the night everything changed. It was January 14th, a Wednesday. I remember the day because it was the coldest night of the year so far. I'm talking 9 degrees, wind chill below zero, the kind of cold where the air hurts your face. I'd been working late at the office because it was tax season prep and I was buried in client files. I finally left around 1 in the morning, exhausted, running on coffee and spite. I was about 20 minutes into my drive home on the highway when my Civic started making a sound that I can only describe as a mechanical death rattle. The engine light came on, then the temperature gauge spiked, and before I could even process what was happening, the car just died. Right there on the highway. No shoulder nearby, just a narrow strip of gravel between the lane and a guardrail. I managed to coast it to a slightly wider spot and threw on my hazards. I sat there for a minute, trying not to panic. It was 2 in the morning. The highway was empty. I could see my breath inside the car because the heat had died with the engine. I pulled out my phone and did what any normal person would do. I called my family. Mom first. Straight to voicemail. Hey Mom, it's Ted. My car broke down on the highway, and it's really cold out here. Can you or Dad come get me? I'm on 71 South near the Wilmington exit. Please call me back. Dad next. Voicemail. Dad, it's Ted. Car died on the highway. I'm stranded and it's below zero. I really need a ride. Please call me when you get this. Scott. Voicemail. Hey Scott, it's me. I'm stuck on 71, car broke down. It's freezing. Can you come get me or call someone? Please. 3 calls. 3 voicemails. I sat in that freezing car for 45 minutes, watching my phone, willing it to ring. Nothing. Not a call, not a text, not even a read receipt. I tried each of them one more time. Nothing. So I did the only thing I could do. I got out of my car, zipped my coat up to my chin, and started walking. 2 miles to the nearest gas station. In 9-degree weather. At 2:30 in the morning. By the time I got there, I couldn't feel my fingers or my toes. My face was numb. I walked into that gas station and the clerk, a kid who couldn't have been older than 19, looked at me like I was a ghost. He gave me a cup of coffee on the house and let me sit by the heating vent while I called Paige. She answered on the second ring, half asleep, and said she'd be there in 30 minutes. She showed up in 22. On the drive back to my apartment, I didn't say much. Paige kept looking over at me, and finally she said, "None of them called back?" I shook my head. She reached over and held my hand. "I'm sorry, Ted." That was all she said. It was enough. The next morning I woke up to 0 missed calls, 0 texts. Nothing from any of them. It was like I'd never called at all. I gave them a week. A full 7 days. I figured maybe they'd been asleep, maybe their phones were on silent, maybe there was some perfectly reasonable explanation that didn't involve them just not caring. I checked my phone constantly. Every notification, every buzz, I'd grab it hoping to see Mom or Dad or Scott's name. Nothing. It was like screaming into a void. Then, exactly 6 days after I nearly froze to death on the side of a highway, my dad texted me. And I swear to you, I read this message 3 times because I thought I was hallucinating. It said, "Your mom needs help moving furniture Saturday. Don't be late." That was it. No, "Hey, how are you?" No, "Sorry we missed your calls." No, "Are you alive?" Just a command. Show up. Move furniture. Don't inconvenience us by being tardy. I stared at that text for a solid 5 minutes. Paige was sitting next to me on the couch, and she watched my face change. "What happened?" she asked. I handed her my phone without a word. She read it, and I watched her expression go from confusion to disbelief to something I'd never seen on her face before. Anger. Real, genuine anger on my behalf. She handed the phone back and said, "If you go move that furniture, I will lose respect for you." She said it calmly, which made it land even harder. I left my dad on read. First time in my life I didn't respond to a family request. First time I didn't jump when they said jump. And I'm not going to lie, it felt terrifying. My whole body was telling me to text back, to say "Sure, Dad." What time? To fall back into the pattern. But I didn't. I set my phone face down on the coffee table and Paige and I watched a movie. I don't even remember what it was. Something with explosions. Saturday came and went. I didn't show up. By Sunday morning my phone was a war zone. 3 missed calls from my mom. 2 from my dad. A text from Scott that said, "Dude, where were you yesterday? Mom's pissed." And then the voicemail from my mother. Oh, that voicemail. I'll never forget it as long as I live. "Theodore James, I don't know what's gotten into you, but your father and I needed your help yesterday, and you didn't even have the courtesy to respond. Scott had to move that entire bookcase by himself, and he hurt his back. I hope you're happy. Call me back immediately. Scott hurt his back moving a bookcase. Scott, the former quarterback, the guy who spent 3 days a week at the gym, hurt his back moving a bookcase. And somehow that was my fault. Not the fact that they ignored 3 voicemails from their youngest son who was stranded in sub-zero temperatures. No, the real tragedy was Scott's back. I called my mom back. I don't know why. Maybe I'm a glutton for punishment. Maybe I still had some naive hope that if I just explained what happened, she'd apologize and everything would click into place. She picked up on the first ring, which was ironic, considering she couldn't be bothered to answer at 2 in the morning when I was freezing to death. "Where were you Saturday?" she started. "No, hello. Mom, I need to talk to you about something," I said. "You can talk to me about it after you explain why you left your family hanging." "That's actually exactly what I want to talk about," I said. 2 weeks ago, my car broke down on the highway at 2 in the morning. It was 9 degrees outside. I called you, Dad and Scott. None of you picked up. None of you called me back. I walked 2 miles in the freezing cold to a gas station. There was a pause, a long one. Then she said, "Well, it was the middle of the night, Ted. We were sleeping." I know. That's why I left voicemails. Detailed voicemails. Explaining that I was stranded. In the cold. On a highway. I didn't hear my phone. Okay, what about the next morning? You didn't see the missed call? The voicemail? You didn't think to call me back? Another pause. I must have forgotten. It was a busy week. Your father had a dentist appointment, and Scott was dealing with that thing at work. So you forgot. Ted, I don't appreciate your tone. Things happen. You're fine, aren't you? You obviously figured it out. I walked 2 miles in 9-degree weather, Mom. My fingers were so numb I could barely hold my phone. Paige had to come get me at 3 in the morning. Well, thank goodness for Paige. See, it all worked out. I sat there holding the phone, and something inside me just went quiet. Not angry, not sad, just quiet, like a switch flipped. I'd spent my entire life making excuses for these people, telling myself that they loved me in their own way, that they were just busy, that Scott needed more attention because Scott had more going on. But standing on that highway, watching my breath freeze, calling people who were supposed to love me unconditionally and getting nothing back, that wasn't being busy. That was a choice. "I'm not going to argue with you about this, Mom," I said, "but I want you to know that I hear you. Loud and clear." What's that supposed to mean? It means I understand where I stand. I've understood for a while now, but this confirmed it. She launched into a speech about how I was being dramatic, how I always had a chip on my shoulder, how she and Dad had given me a wonderful childhood and I was being ungrateful. I let her finish. Then I said, "I have to go," and I hung up. Paige was watching me from the kitchen doorway. "How'd that go?" she asked, though her face told me she already knew. She said it all worked out because you came and got me. Paige closed her eyes and took a slow breath through her nose. "I'm going to say something, and I need you to actually hear it, okay?" She walked over and sat next to me. "Your family treats you like you're optional. Not sometimes. All the time. And you keep showing up for them like they're going to suddenly change, and they're not going to change, Ted. They've shown you who they are 1,000 times. "I know," I said. "Do you?" Because knowing it and doing something about it are 2 different things. She was right. She was always right. It was one of the most annoying and wonderful things about her. Over the next few days, I started paying attention to the pattern in a way I never had before. Not just the big things like the highway incident, but the small daily indignities that I'd been brushing off for years. I went back through my phone and looked at the family group chat. In the last 6 months, my parents had shared 43 photos of Scott. His new car, his vacation to Cancun, his company's holiday party. Photos of me? 0. I'd posted a picture of Paige and me at a Reds game in September. My mom hearted it. My dad didn't react at all. Scott sent a thumbs up. When Scott posted a photo of his new grill, my mom responded with 7 exclamation points, and my dad wrote, "That's my boy." I looked at my call log. In the last 3 months, my parents had called me 11 times. 9 of those were asking for something. Help with taxes, help with a computer issue. Could I pick something up for them since I was in the area, even though I lived 90 minutes away? The other 2 were my mom calling to tell me about something great Scott did. I showed all of this to Paige. She looked at it, and then looked at me and said, "So what are you going to do about it?" That was the question, wasn't it? What was I going to do about it? For 29 years I'd been doing the same thing. Showing up, being useful, being quiet, being grateful for the scraps. And what had it gotten me? A freezing walk down a highway and a text telling me not to be late for furniture duty. Something had to change. And for the first time in my life, I decided that something was going to be me. The first few weeks of pulling back from my family were harder than I expected. Not because I missed the dysfunction, but because guilt is a powerful drug and I'd been mainlining it for almost 3 decades. Every time my phone buzzed, part of me wanted to check if it was them, wanted to see if they'd finally realized something was wrong. But I held the line. When my mom texted asking if I could help my dad set up his new printer, I didn't respond. When Scott sent a message to the group chat about some barbecue he was hosting, I didn't react. When my dad called on a random Thursday evening, I let it go to voicemail. He didn't leave one. The silence from my end clearly rattled them, but not in the way I'd hoped. Instead of self-reflection, they chose offense. My mom started making passive-aggressive comments through the family group chat. Things like, "I guess some people are too busy to care about their family," and "It must be nice to only think about yourself." I read every single one and felt nothing. Well, almost nothing. There was a tiny part of me that wanted to fire back, to lay out every receipt, every ignored call, every forgotten milestone. But Paige reminded me that arguing with people who refuse to see you is like trying to teach a cat to apologize. A waste of time, and the cat doesn't care. Meanwhile, something interesting was happening at work. My firm had landed a big new client, a regional restaurant chain that was expanding into 3 new states. My boss, a guy named Grant who'd been quietly mentoring me for the past 2 years, pulled me into his office and told me he wanted me to lead the account. "You're the most detail-oriented person on this floor," he said. "And honestly, Ted, you're the only one I trust not to screw this up." It was the first time in a long time that someone in a position of authority had looked at me and seen potential instead of an afterthought. I threw myself into that account. 12-hour days, weekends at the office, spreadsheets that would make your eyes bleed. But I loved it. For the first time, I wasn't just doing my job, I was building something. The client, a guy named Ray who'd started with a single diner in Dayton 30 years ago, was one of the most genuine people I'd ever met. He'd call me on Friday afternoons just to check in, ask how I was doing, tell me about his grandkids. A man I'd known for a few weeks was showing me more basic human consideration than my own parents had shown me in years. Paige noticed the change in me before I did. "You're different," she said one night while we were cooking dinner. I was chopping peppers, and she was stirring something on the stove that smelled incredible. "Different how?" I asked. "You're standing up straighter," she said. Literally and figuratively. She wasn't wrong. For the first time in my life, I wasn't hunching under the weight of trying to earn love from people who'd already decided I wasn't worth it. Around this time, I also started building a real friendship with my coworker, a guy named Adam. He was a few years older than me, divorced, funny as heck, and had this way of cutting through nonsense with a single sentence. When I told him the abbreviated version of my family situation, he looked at me and said, "Ted, you know the difference between family and strangers. Strangers don't have your phone number. That's literally the only difference with these people." It was harsh, but it made me laugh, and sometimes laughing at something is the first step to healing from it. 3 months into leading the restaurant account, Ray called me into a meeting at his corporate office. I figured it was a routine check-in, but when I walked in, he had his CFO and his attorney sitting at the table. "Ted," he said, "we've been impressed with your work. Really impressed. And we've been talking, and we'd like to offer you a position. In-house. Director of Finance for the whole operation." He slid a folder across the table. I opened it, and I swear my heart stopped. The salary was nearly double what I was making. Full benefits, equity stake, company car. I must have stared at that paper for a solid minute because Ray laughed and said, "You can blink, son." I took the job, gave my notice at the firm, thanked Grant for everything he'd done for me, and started my new position in March. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. I was suddenly sitting in on meetings about expansion strategy and franchise logistics and lease negotiations. I was in over my head some days, but Ray had this way of making you feel like you belonged even when you weren't sure you did. "You'll figure it out," he'd say. "You always do." I wanted to bottle that energy and hand it to every parent who'd ever made their kid feel small. Around this time, Paige and I had been together for almost 2 years, and things were getting serious. Like, ring shopping serious. She'd brought me through the worst period of my life without ever making me feel like a project or a charity case. She just loved me. Plainly, consistently, without conditions. It was such a foreign concept that I almost didn't recognize it at first. One night, lying in bed, I told her that. I didn't know love was supposed to feel this easy, I said. She rolled over, looked at me, and said, "It's not always easy, but it should never make you feel like you don't matter." I proposed to her 2 weeks later. She said yes before I finished the question. During all of this, my family had moved from passive aggression to full concern. Not concern for me, mind you, but concern about how my absence was affecting them. My mom called Paige directly and asked what was going on with me. Paige, because she's a saint with a spine of steel, told her, "Maybe you should ask Ted." My mom said she'd tried, but I wasn't answering. Paige said, "That should tell you something." My mom hung up on her. Then Scott showed up. Not at my apartment, because he didn't know my new address since I'd moved in with Paige. He showed up at my old firm, only to find out I didn't work there anymore. He called me that night, and I actually picked up because I was curious. "Where the heck are you, man?" he said. "I went to your office, and they said you left months ago." "I got a new job," I said. "Doing what?" "Where?" "I'm the director of finance for a restaurant group." There was a pause. "Director? Since when?" "Since March." "Why didn't you tell anyone?" I almost laughed. "Scott, when's the last time anyone in this family asked what was going on in my life? Not what they needed from me. What was going on with me?" He didn't have an answer, because there wasn't one. He mumbled something about how I was being dramatic, which apparently was the family's go-to diagnosis for me, and then said Mom and Dad were worried. I told him they had a funny way of showing it. He got frustrated and said, "You can't just disappear on your family, Ted." And I said, "Watch me." I hung up. Paige was standing in the kitchen with her arms crossed and an expression I can only describe as proud concern. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. "Yeah, actually, I think I am." The next few months were the best of my life. The job was going great, the restaurant group was expanding faster than projected, and Ray had started treating me less like an employee and more like a protege. Paige and I were planning a small wedding for October. I put a down payment on a house. An actual house, with a yard and a garage and a front porch where I could drink coffee in the morning like some kind of functional adult. I was building a life that I chose, not one that was assigned to me by default. And then, because life has a sense of humor that borders on cruel, everything converged at once. My mom was diagnosed with a back condition that needed surgery. Scott's marriage to his wife Brittany hit the rocks because it turned out Brittany had been having an affair with her personal trainer, and my dad's small pension fund took a hit that left my parents scrambling financially. Within the span of about 6 weeks, the Golden family crumbled. And guess whose phone started ringing again? The first call came from my dad on a Sunday morning. I was on the front porch of my new house, drinking coffee, watching the neighborhood wake up. Paige was inside making breakfast. My phone buzzed and I saw Dad on the screen and felt my stomach drop in a way that annoyed me. I was 29 years old and my father's name on my phone still triggered a stress response. That tells you everything you need to know. I let it ring. He called again immediately. Then a text. "Ted, need to talk. It's important. Call me back." 2 hours later, my mom called. Then Scott. Then my mom again. By noon, I had 11 missed calls and 4 texts, each one escalating in urgency. The final text from my mom said, "This is a family emergency, Theodore. Pick up your phone." I looked at Paige. She'd been watching the phone light up all morning without saying anything. Finally, she said, "You should probably find out what's going on. Not for them, for you. So you're not wondering." She was right. So I called my dad back. "Ted, thank God," he said, and I could hear something in his voice I'd never heard before. Desperation. "We need to talk. Can you come home this weekend?" "What's going on, Dad?" He laid it all out. My mom's surgery was going to cost a significant amount even after insurance. Scott was going through a divorce and had already burned through most of his savings on lawyers. And my dad's pension situation meant they couldn't cover the gap. He talked for about 10 minutes straight, which was more words than he'd directed at me in the last year combined. Then he got to the punchline. "We were hoping you could help with your mother's medical expenses. Scott can't contribute right now with everything he's going through, and we're stretched thin." I sat there on my porch, watching a squirrel chase another squirrel across the yard, and I let the silence hang. "How much are we talking?" I asked. "About $15,000. And Scott can't contribute anything? He's dealing with a lot right now, Ted. The divorce is destroying him. Right? And you're calling me because you're family. Because we need you." There it was. The magic word. Need. Not want. Not love. Need. They needed me. The same way they needed me to move furniture and fix computers and pick up Aunt Brenda from the airport. I was the utility player. The guy you call when you need something done, not when you want to share something good. I'll think about it, I said. What do you mean you'll think about it? This is your mother. I said I'll think about it, Dad. He started to argue, but I told him I had to go and hung up. Paige was in the doorway. 15,000, she said. She'd heard enough. I nodded. What are you going to do? She asked. I honestly don't know. Over the next few days, I thought about it constantly. Not just the money, which I could technically afford now thanks to the new job, but the principle of it. These people had ignored me for years. They'd left me stranded on a highway in the dead of winter and never even apologized. They'd celebrated every breath Scott took while treating my accomplishments like background noise. And now that their world was falling apart, they wanted me to write a check and play the dutiful son. I talked to Adam about it at work. He leaned back in his chair and said, "Let me get this straight. They ignore you for years. They can't be bothered to answer your call when you're literally freezing to death. And now they want 15 grand? Ted, I've seen better deals at a used car lot." I also talked to Ray, which I hadn't planned on doing, but he caught me staring at my desk one afternoon and asked what was on my mind. I gave him the short version. He listened without interrupting, which is a rare skill, and then he said something I'll never forget. "Ted, I've got 3 kids, all grown, and I'll tell you something I learned the hard way. Love isn't a balance sheet. You don't owe people your loyalty just because they share your blood. Loyalty is earned. Every day, by showing up, not just when you need something, but when it's inconvenient, when it's hard, when it's 2 in the morning and it's cold." He didn't know the specific details of my highway story, but somehow he hit it dead center anyway. That conversation clarified things for me. I wasn't going to write a blank check and go back to being the family doormat. But I also wasn't going to become the kind of person who watches someone suffer and does nothing, even if they probably deserved it. What I was going to do was set terms. For the first time in my life, I was going to have a conversation with my family where I held all the cards, and they were going to hear me. I called my dad and told him I'd come home Saturday. "Bring Mom and Scott," I said. "We're all going to sit down and talk." "About the money?" he asked. "About everything." I spent that week preparing like I was going into a board meeting. Not because I'm a psycho who makes PowerPoints about family drama, although Paige did joke that she expected a slide deck, but because I wanted to be clear. I wanted to have specific examples, specific dates, specific instances that they couldn't wave away with "you're being dramatic" or "you always had a chip on your shoulder." I went through my phone, my call logs, the group chat. I wrote it all down, not to attack them, but to show them the pattern. Because I think part of me still believed that if they could just see it, if they could see the data laid out in front of them, they'd understand. Paige drove up with me on Saturday. She offered to wait in the car, but I told her I wanted her there. "You're going to be my wife," I said. "They need to see that you're part of this." She squeezed my hand and said, "I've been waiting for this since the night I picked you up from that gas station." We pulled into my parents' driveway at noon. The house looked the same as it always did. White siding, blue shutters, the same lawn gnome my mom bought at a craft fair in 2012. Scott's truck was already there. I took a breath, looked at Paige, and we went inside. They were all in the living room. My mom was in her recliner with a heating pad on her back. My dad was in his chair by the window. Scott was on the couch, looking like he hadn't slept in a week. He'd lost weight and had the hollow-eyed look of a man whose life was actively falling apart. For a brief second, I felt a flash of sympathy. Then I remembered the voicemail he never returned, and the sympathy receded to a manageable level. "Thanks for coming," my dad said. He stood up and reached out to shake my hand, which was a weird, formal gesture that told me he was nervous. "Hi, honey," my mom said. Then she looked at Paige. "Paige." "Diane," Paige said evenly. We sat down. Nobody said anything for a moment. Then my dad cleared his throat and said, "So, about your mother's medical expenses. Before we talk about money," I said, "we're going to talk about some other things first." My dad frowned. "Ted, this isn't the time for whatever grudge you've been nursing. Actually, Dad, this is exactly the time. Because you need something from me, which means for once in my life, you're going to sit there and listen to what I have to say." The room went quiet. My mom shifted in her recliner. Scott crossed his arms. Paige sat beside me, steady and calm. I have spent my entire life being the second priority in this family. I said. And I've spent my entire life pretending that was okay. It's not okay. It was never okay. And the reason I pulled back these last several months isn't because I'm dramatic or ungrateful or have a chip on my shoulder. It's because I finally realized that I deserve better than what you've been giving me. My dad opened his mouth to respond, but I held up my hand. I'm not done. I pulled out my phone and opened my notes. On January 14th of this year, my car broke down on the highway at 2 in the morning. It was 9 degrees outside. I called all 3 of you. I left voicemails. Detailed voicemails explaining where I was and that I needed help. None of you called me back. Not that night. Not the next morning. Not ever. I walked 2 miles in freezing temperatures to a gas station. Paige drove 30 minutes to come get me at 3 in the morning. She was the only person who answered. My mom started to speak, but I kept going. 6 days later, Dad, you texted me asking me to come move furniture. No mention of the highway. No mention of my calls. Just a command. Don't be late. When I finally brought it up to Mom, she told me it all worked out because Paige came and got me. Like that was an acceptable answer. Like the fact that my girlfriend did what my parents wouldn't was somehow a success story. Ted, we were asleep, my mom said. It was the middle of the night. You didn't check your phone the next morning? You didn't see the missed call? The voicemail from your son saying he was stranded in the cold. I told you I forgot. It was a busy week. Too busy to make sure your kid wasn't dead on the side of a road. Got it. Now hold on, my dad said, leaning forward. I'm not done, Dad. I have more. I scrolled through my notes. In the last year, you've called me 11 times. 9 of those calls were asking for favors. 2 were to tell me about something Scott did. 0 were to ask how I was doing. 0 were to acknowledge my promotion, my new job, my engagement. Did you even know I was engaged? My mom blinked. Engaged? Paige and I are getting married in October. I posted it in the family group chat. I also told Scott on the phone months ago. Everyone looked at Scott. He shifted on the couch and rubbed the back of his neck. I meant to say something, he muttered. When? When were you going to mention it? Or was it just not important enough to register because it was about me and not about you? The room was silent. I could hear the clock ticking in the hallway. My mom's heating pad hummed quietly. I looked at each of them, and for the first time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like the second son, the afterthought, the utility player. I felt like a man who was finally standing at full height. I want to ask you something, I said, looking at my mom and dad. And I want an honest answer. Why? Why has it always been like this? Why was Scott always the priority? What did I do? My mom's eyes filled with tears. My dad looked at the floor. Scott stared at the wall. Nobody said anything for a long time. Then my dad, in a voice I'd never heard him use before, said, "You didn't do anything, Ted." Then why? He took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. Scott always needed more. He was louder. He demanded more attention. And we just fell into a pattern. You were always the easy one. You never complained. You never caused problems. You just handled things. So we let you. And I guess over time we just assumed you were fine. I wasn't fine, Dad. I was just quiet about it. My mom was crying now. I didn't realize it was that bad, she whispered. I thought you knew we loved you. Knowing someone loves you and feeling it are two different things, Mom. I have felt invisible in this family my entire life. And the highway was just the final proof. Scott, who had been uncharacteristically silent, finally spoke. I should have called you back, he said. That night, I saw the voicemail the next morning and I just didn't think about it. I figured you were fine because you're always fine. And that's on me. It was the most self-aware thing I'd ever heard Scott say. I didn't know what to do with it, so I just nodded. Here's what's going to happen, I said. I'm not writing you a check for $15,000 and going back to the way things were. That's not on the table. What is on the table is this. I will help with Mom's medical costs. I'll contribute $5,000. Not because I owe you. Not because I'm the family ATM. Because despite everything, I don't want Mom to suffer, and I can afford to help. My dad started to say something, but I cut him off. But there are conditions. First, Scott contributes equally. I don't care if he's going through a divorce. He can figure it out. Sell the boat. Sell the grill Mom was so excited about. I don't care. He's not exempt because he's having a bad year. Second, I am done being the one who gives, and gives while getting nothing back. If you want me in your lives, you're going to have to show up for mine. Call me on my birthday. Ask about my job. Acknowledge my engagement. Come to my wedding. Treat Paige like family, because she's the one who showed up when none of you would. And third, I want to hear you say it. Out loud. I want to hear you acknowledge that you treated me like an afterthought. Not, we didn't realize, or you never said anything. I want you to own it. The silence in that room was the heaviest thing I've ever felt. My mom was wiping her eyes. My dad was staring at his hands. Scott looked like he'd been hit by a truck, which was honestly the most appropriate reaction anyone had. My dad spoke first. "You're right," he said. "We took you for granted. I took you for granted. You were so steady and reliable that I stopped thinking about whether you were happy. And that's not an excuse. That's a failure." My mom nodded. "I'm sorry, Ted. I'm so sorry. I should have called you back that night. I should have called you back every day after. I should have seen what was happening." Scott looked at me. I was a crappy brother. I knew it on some level, but it was easier to just keep going than to admit it. "You deserved better from me. I won't pretend that fixed everything. It didn't. 29 years of being invisible doesn't get healed in one living room conversation. But it was a start. A real one. Not the performative kind where everyone cries and hugs, and then goes back to normal by Tuesday. I could see it in their faces. They were hearing me for the first time, and it was uncomfortable for them. And that discomfort was exactly what needed to happen. Scott called me 2 days later. Not to ask for anything. Just to talk. He asked about the new job, about the wedding, about Paige. It was awkward and stilted and about 6 years overdue, but he did it. My mom sent Paige a friend request on social media and started commenting on her posts. Small, weird, late gestures, but gestures nonetheless. My dad called me the following Sunday just to ask how my week was. He didn't mention Scott once. Were they perfect after that? No. Old habits die hard, and sometimes my mom still slipped into Scott-centric mode at family dinners. But now when it happened, she'd catch herself. Or my dad would nudge her. Or Scott himself would say, "Hey, what about Ted?" Which was genuinely surreal to hear. Paige and I got married in October. Small ceremony, 60 people, in a barn venue outside Cincinnati that we decorated ourselves. Ray and his wife came. Adam was one of my groomsmen. My parents were there in the front row. My mom cried, and for the first time, I believe those tears were for me. Scott stood up during the toasts and said, "My brother is the best man I know." I spent a lot of years not saying that, and I'm done wasting time. Paige squeezed my hand under the table and whispered, "Better late than never." The restaurant group hit record revenue that year. Ray promoted me to VP of Finance and told me I was the best hire he'd ever made. I stood in my office on the day of the announcement, looking out the window at the parking lot, and I thought about that gas station. The fluorescent lights, the coffee the clerk gave me, the heating vent I sat next to while I waited for the only person who cared enough to answer the phone. I thought about how far I'd walked in the cold that night and how much further I'd walked since. I'm 30 now. I own a house with a woman I love. I have a job that challenges me and a boss who respects me. I have a family that's learning, slowly and imperfectly, how to treat me like I matter. And I have a front porch where I drink my coffee every morning and watch the neighborhood wake up, and I don't feel invisible anymore. Last January, on the anniversary of the highway breakdown, my dad called me at 7 in the morning. "Just checking in," he said, "making sure you're warm." It was clumsy and a little too on the nose, but I laughed. "I'm warm, Dad. Thanks for calling." "Always," he said. And for the first time, I believed him. You know, someone told me once that the opposite of love isn't hate. It's indifference. And for most of my life, that's what I got from the people who were supposed to love me the most. Not cruelty, not abuse, just a quiet, steady indifference that made me question whether I was worth anything at all. Turns out I was. I just had to stop asking them to confirm it and start confirming it myself. So if you're reading this and you're the kid who never gets the phone call back, the one who shows up but never gets shown up for, the one who walks 2 miles in the cold because nobody answered, I want you to know something. You are not the problem. You were never the problem. And the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building a life so good that you don't need their approval to know your own worth. I'm Ted. I'm 30, and I'm doing just fine.